The movie opens with Gia Rossi on her way to an interview. She gets in front of the building and takes a small pause, and the camera pans into view of the building itself. She takes a moment and walks into the building. She passes through the lobby where there are a lot of people and goes through to where a reception is. She gets to the reception and tells the receptionist that she's here for an interview which she is guided into. The first question Miss Lane asks her is to tell her about yourself. She gives the same answer she gives in her CV. She talks about who she is and what her name is and what school she graduated, and Miss Lane tells her she is not interested in all of this and rather would prefer to hear what she doesn't already know about her, anything that is not in her CV, and that she wants more information about her life. She asks Gia to tell her why she wants to work in a restaurant, especially because it seems like what she has to offer on her CV is a degree in restaurant management and a lot of heart. And then she tells Lane that her family owns a restaurant and that she's worked with them since she was little, and the restaurant just doesn't have the kind of magic her company has. She explains that she wants more than her 3 brothers, who work at their parents' restaurant. The eldest son is probably going to take over the restaurant when her father retires, and the other 2 will take a branch of Rossi of their own in different locations. She then explains that she wants more. Miss Lane asks her what she wants to accomplish. She says that she wants to be able to help her brothers achieve their goals and also help other people do the same, which is the reason Miss Lane is interested in going into the restaurant business and working with a restaurateur. Miss Lane is not very impressed with Gia's answer and tells her thank you for coming in and for her time, before dismissing her. Gia gets up to go but pauses at the door and decides to express herself a little further before she leaves. She tells Miss Lane that she really wants this job. She does have a lot of heart and she's proactive, with a lot of passion and drive, and Lane will never have regret hiring her for the job. Lane then tells her that she does not believe she is the right boss for her, which is why she would not be hiring her. Gia says she doesn't understand, and Lane tells her she doesn't have to understand. Gia proceeds to explain to her that they have a lot in common. She says that she knows that Lane had someone, a man in her life that didn't believe in her and underestimated her, and she had to prove wrong, which she did prove him and everyone wrong. And that she was the same. That she had a man in her life that she needed to prove wrong, and this was an opportunity to prove him wrong. Miss Lane does not budge but rather tells her thank you, and Gia finally leaves. The movie cut through to a scene of Gia's family restaurant where she and her brothers are discussing her interview. One says her interviewer is a fool for not giving her the job, and her brother agrees, as they make fun of him for always repeating what the other one says. Her mom tells her it's good to see her smile and that everything happens for a reason. While they are discussing, Miss Lane walks into the restaurant and strikes a conversation with Gia. She tells Gia she found her family's restaurant online and it has good reviews. Gia tells her it's the best Italian restaurant in town. She also adds that a lot of the reviews said that the place improved throughout the years, and she assumes it's because of her. Her brother answers that she is right. She moves straight into business talk and says she did have somebody who underestimated her, but he didn't take advantage of her. She adds that she left the door open and he walked right out. She then said that Ian had taught her a lot and she had come to realize that he got just as much benefits as she did from their whole relationship. Then she tells her that she has been getting used to the way she has been running things generally, and now she wants to see her business from fresh eyes, from a new perspective. She wants to feed off somebody else's hunger, and then Gia asks her if she wants a protege, which she answers yes to. Then she says the hours are going to be long because she's going to work weekends. She could call in the middle of the night because she works all the time, and then asks if that is okay with her. Gia agrees, but her brother cuts in and says it's not, because he would like to be seeing his sister every once in a while. Then she introduces her 3 brothers and her mom to Miss Lane. Then Miss Lane welcomes her to the company and they hit their wine glasses together in a cheer. The movie then cuts to 2 years later. After Gia had started working with Miss Lane, she and Lane are meeting a client in a fancy restaurant. A group of siblings, Chad and Stacy, are there. They exchange pleasantries and go straight into business. Lane asks them if their accommodation was to their liking, and while Chad says it was fine, Stacy says it was not. Working with Ian seemed like a better option to them. While Lane and Gia are trying to convince the twins to work with them, they are torn in their decision. It is looking like Stacy was leaning towards Ian while Chad wanted to work with Gia and Lane. In the course of the meeting, Stacy had said that it was only right to give Ian a chance to prove himself before they moved to other options. Chad then reminds her that it is both their career on the line and both their decisions to make. While they are talking, Ian and a new person walks into the restaurant and towards their table. The new person is Jax, Gia's old flame. She sees him and a memory of them being intimate goes through her mind. They conclude their business in a tense atmosphere. Gia tells Lane about Jax and his family and how influential they are, and also tells her that he is the man she has to prove point to. She then tells Lane that it wasn't serious and more like an extended one-night stand, and then she concludes that she doesn't even think he recognized her back in the restaurant. When they get back to the office, Lane asks Gia if she is okay with going with the deal. Gia says that even though she is not entirely indifferent about Jax, she could handle it. In that same moment, she gets a call that Jax is around for a meeting, and Lane gives her a choice to stay or go. She decides to go and not join the meeting instead. Then as she leaves, another memory comes into her head, one of how she and Jax met in the first place. She sees Jax at the reception and greets him formally. He follows her and asks her how long she will keep pretending that she doesn't know him. She tells him that it's all about business before he says that he is interested in getting reacquainted with her in a hotel. She sees it as an insult from him, insinuating that she is cheap. Lane works in and interrupts their argument. Gia then leaves to go have dinner with Chad. Chad tells Gia it was smart of her to bring him to her family restaurant and that it makes him feel like she plans on keeping him for a while. He also says his sister knows what they are looking for and that what Gia and Miss Lane is offering is exactly that, but because she is sleeping with Ian, it is messing with her choices. Chad tells her he will take her deal even if Stacy doesn't want to. At that moment, they see Stacy and Jax walk into the restaurant. While Gia is on the phone, Jax walks in and accuses her of sleeping with Chad so he would sign the contract with her. She tells him that she is not sleeping with him again and he asks why. This makes her so angry at him, and because of this, she tells him he left her with no word for a year. And he replied what they had needed to end quietly, and as they continue the conversation, Jax tells her to have dinner with him, but she refuses and leaves after being called out by her brother. In the next scene, Gia receives a box of chocolate that was obviously a gift from Jax. The box immediately triggers memories of her and Jax being intimate again. Ian then calls and invites Gia to have dinner with him. Knowing that Lane was listening in, he invites her too. At first, Gia is skeptical about agreeing, asking if Ian assumes she has no plans for a Friday night, but finally agrees to go. She wears a dress she got and receives very high praise from her brother and his wife. And when she gets to the venue, she also receives compliments from Lane, who tells her that she is sexy and should never downplay it. She had noticed her doing that at work but told her that there is nothing wrong with being sexy and successful as a woman. As the party progresses, Ian says he paired her with Chad and had also invited him. He invites Gia to have a dance with him and begins to question her about Jax as they dance. He asks her how she knows him and tries to sow a seed to doubt Gia about Lane. Jax soon arrives and steals Gia from Ian for a dance and tries to remind her of their time together. Eventually, Gia asks Jax that they should go to the garden for a drink and Jax agrees. As soon as they are outside, Jax asks for a kiss, which Gia refuses, but he proceeds to plan a kiss on her lips either way. He tells her he wants her and she replies by telling him that he had her but chose to walk away. He explained that even though he regrets it, it was the best decision he could make for her. He says he could not turn her to one of them, referring to the people inside. Gia is confused by this statement, but they are soon interrupted by a duo of Lane and Chad. On their way home, Lane informs Gia that she got Chad to sign the contract and tells Gia that to celebrate, they had earned a break. She advised Gia to turn off her phone and have a work-free weekend. Gia is excited and gets home to find her brothers and family already sleeping. She calls her brother in New Jersey, and even though he is busy, he calls her back and she tells him she is coming over that night. He agrees, and soon enough, she arrives and is picked from the cab by her brother. He asks about Jax and she confesses that she is still in love with him. The next morning, Jax turns up at the restaurant. It turns out he had followed her to New Jersey. He asks her again to have dinner with him, and this time, she agrees, but not to the dinner. She makes a counter offer to follow him to his hotel room. He initially says there's no rush, but she convinces him to go with her by reminding him that he had popped up randomly 3 times in 1 week in places she was. It was obvious what he wanted. When they get to Jax's hotel room, they barely make it past the front door before they get intimate in front of it. She gets up to leave almost immediately after it happens and goes back to Rossi's, where she and Jax have a conversation about his family. It turned out the woman that married his father was not his mother, but a stepmother, and that his real mother had died years ago. He then goes further to explain that that was why only political marriages worked in his family, while usually a love match failed terribly. He says this, giving an example with his parents' marriage being a love match that ended badly. She gets back home with her brother, who begins to question her, wanting to know what was going on between her and Jax. She tells him it's temporal and that this time, she knew the rules of the game. But he tells her he was sure Jax is in love with her, but she doubts it. In the next scene, Gia and her brothers are shown playing basketball. Jax arrives and plays with them. Him and Gia team up against her brothers and win the match against them. After the weekend, Gia is back to work and sees flowers on her desk. A coworker tells her the person who sent the flowers might be the keeper after all. It makes her smile, but her smile is short-lived as she learns that Ian had signed a deal with Stacy over their work-free weekend. Through Jax, he had known that they weren't working that weekend and used that as an opportunity to win Stacy over while they were caught unaware. Because of this, Gia decides to take Chad to Atlanta, hoping this would convince him to close the deal. She also tells Lane she is supposed to have dinner with Jax that same night as she leaves. She meets Jax outside and they share a passionate kiss, after which she proceeds to slap him across the face for messing things up for her, after sleeping with her over the weekend. He tells her it's just business and that she should work further to keep up. As they leave, he also adds that the slap after the kiss was overkill. They arrive at Jax's place and Gia is honestly surprised by the aesthetics and that he has had the place for over a year. She believes it's not his style, but he soon offers her a drink, which she takes. He then apologizes for screwing her over and she asks him why he did it. He opens up to her about what was in his blood and how his family does. They liked messing with people and betraying them. He then proceeds to tell her that it was either she learned to accept it as what was or walked out of the door, which if she does, he wasn't going to blame her. She refuses and says that she was going to step up to the challenge and match his backstabbing move with one of hers, but only after she raises him a round of angry intimacy. They soon get intimate, but to punish him, she leaves him hanging, and while he is trying to convince her to come back to bed, his father calls from outside. He goes out reluctantly and has a conversation with his father. While that is happening, Gia walks downstairs to his home office and finds pictures of herself in frames. This freaks her out and she decides to leave. She meets Jax and his father talking in the hallway. She nods politely at them and leaves. Jax's father follows her and they have a conversation in the elevator about business. He switches the conversation and tells her that Jax is very overprotective of her, and she asks what he had to protect her from. His father doesn't answer but instead invites her and Jax to dinner, telling her he would like to get to know her. The next morning, Gia asks for Diana's number from her brother because she wanted her to investigate Jax's family. He says he hopes that she does dig up some dirt on them to finally prove that Jax was no good. Then he adds that he will only give the number if she helps him with laundry. While she is doing laundry, Jax calls Gia and tells her she was supposed to call him and asks her why she left the way she left. She ignores that part of the conversation and told him that his father had invited them to dinner. Jax immediately says they are not going, to which she replies that they are. Then she asks him about the pictures in his office. Rather than answer, he asks her what she was going to in his office. She says she is trying to process the fact that he was in love with her. He says it's not weird for him to have her photos in his office, which she agrees to, except that the pictures were not taken when they were together. It was after they were no longer in contact. She says it was obvious he had been spying on her. She then proceeds to tell him she was going to figure him out and what he was hiding before he drops the call. Gia soon meets Diana and asks her to help her find out about Jax's family and what he might have been protecting him about. She asks about Jax's mother, and Diana confirms that she was an enigma and had always stayed away from the public eyes until she died. When Gia and Chad finally travel to Atlanta, Chad begins to doubt Gia's ability to handle Jax and tells her he feels like Jax could use her to destroy what they were trying to accomplish. Because of that, he decides to let her go. Gia goes back to her hotel and begins to pack her things, but he hears a knock on the door. It turns out to be Jax. He had flown into Atlanta because she was not picking up his calls. She tells him Chad had just fired her because of him. Not only could she not trust him around her work, she was actually avoiding him. He tells her that he would do anything to see her right now and tells her to stay away from his family, especially his father. He tells her that people who come around his family that weren't strong enough always get broken, and he doesn't want that for her. He tells her it was the reason he had stayed away the first time. He was protecting her from his family. She proceeds to tell him he can't scare her away, and he agrees and tells her that if she wanted to be part of his life, she was going to get all shades of it. She was going to be controlled and her privacy would not be respected. Then she says that he should have just said that he loved her and they were going to make this work. This makes Jax angry. He tells her that things didn't work like this because they weren't in a romance novel. He then tells her he loves her so much it is driving him crazy and that he wants her to stay with him. They make out and make up. In the next scene, Gia moves in with Jax and is helped in by her brothers. When they leave, Jax and Gia immediately start kissing. They end up getting intimate and he later tells her they are going for an event. She is surprised because they didn't have a prior discussion. She then says she will get a dress, but Jax tells her he has already arranged for that. Later that night at the event, Gia meets Allison. They exchange a few unpleasant words before she tells Allison to avoid her. But Allison tells her it didn't work like this in this family. Even though they dislike each other, in the public eye, they were going to do everything together and be closer than sisters. She then tells Gia that she is going to prepare for them having lunch together before she leaves. Gia and Jax later have a fight about Jax interfering in her family business because she thinks his motives are wrong. He tells her to come home with him to finish the conversation and that there was no scenario in which he didn't leave with her. She agrees and leaves with him. When they get home, they make up and agree that they have to work on their communication skills. But there is still tension in the air after they have the conversation, which ends with Gia walking away. Later that night, Jax joins Gia in bed and she pulls away from him. The next morning, Jax sends Gia flowers with a card that has an apology written on it. In the card, he asks her to talk to him tonight about their problems. While she is there, just about to drop the card, her phone rings. It's Diana, who tells her that she had found out dirt on Jax's mother. She had found out that she had been committed to a sanitarium, and even though there had been rumors in the past, she had found evidence that it was all true from a reliable source. She then tells Gia she is running the story even though it had not been part of their agreement. Before Gia will talk, Diana drops the phone. Gia gets back to Jax's place to find the place packed with people in a panic mode. Jax's father tells her that they are trying to put out a fire and have a situation on hand. Gia goes to meet Jax, who is also in a state of disarray. She confesses that she had spoken with Diana and was the one who instigated the whole investigation because she wanted to find out what Jax was trying to protect her from. But she also told him that she didn't know that Diana intended to publish the story and neither did she agree to it. Jax gets angry and finally tells Gia what was wrong with his mother. He tells her that his mother had been a drunk, was weak, and couldn't handle the pressure that came with being part of their family. He adds that she had married the wrong man for what she wanted and couldn't handle the implication. She didn't like their kind of life or the moral compromises that came with it, so she used alcohol as an escape. She was a sweet and kind woman, much like Gia, he adds, which was the reason he felt the need to protect Gia. Gia feels bad about the whole situation and inquires what she can do to help the situation. But in his fit of anger, Jax tells her to leave and that their whole relationship had been a mistake. She is angry and asks him if this is how he discarded people who made mistakes. She tells him to piss off and leaves. As she is packing, she calls her brother and tells him the whole situation, which he ends up blaming her for, as in his opinion, she didn't need to get information about her boyfriend from a third party. He then discloses to her about how Diana was not clean either. She had once told Vincent that she slept with prominent men in the beginning of her career to get leads, and also how she sent provocative pictures to him. After the call, she calls Diana and threatens her to drop the story or she was going to leak her pictures and ruin her reputation. Jax and Gia then make up after the call and get intimate while her phone rings with a call from her brother Vincent. It doesn't take long for her brother to come to the house to challenge her. He thinks she's changed and that it's Jax's fault. She did something out of character. He punches Jax and leaves. After that, Jax kisses Gia and also leaves, promising to fix everything and then come back. In the next scene, it's been 2 weeks and she is telling Angelo, her brother, about how she hasn't spoken to Vincent since the incident, and also how she misses him. Angelo tells her to go to the restaurant and make up with him rather than sit pretty. Then he asks her if Jax is still calling every night. She confirms that he does. Jax hasn't told her anything else about what is going on, or where he is, other than that he loves her and misses her. And he claims he is doing all this because he is protecting her. Angelo then tells her she shouldn't be with him and she should make up with Vincent. Gia then goes to the Rossis to find Vincent. He tells her he had forgiven her long ago and was not talking to her to punish her. They hug and tell each other they miss each other. As they are talking, Jax's father walks in and tells her that she needs to talk to Jax, and that he was going to quit his career in politics because of her. She needs to convince him that she was strong enough for that kind of life and would support him all the way to the White House. But Gia tells him that it is her business what she wants to tell him and asks where he is. He tells her that Jax is in DC and proceeds to fly her there. She knocks on the door and he opens it to see her. They kiss and share that they missed each other. Not long after, Jax gets a call. He proceeds to tell the person on the other line that he is quitting and he is getting married. Turns out it had been a senator he was talking to. He then tells her that no ambition was worth losing her and that he wants a regular and normal life with her. The movie ends with Jax and Gia having a celebration with her family and then sharing a kiss there.